Hello world. We are anonymous. In May of 2018, a 26-story building in São Paulo, Brazil, collapsed into its own footprint, seemingly like the Twin Towers. Before any 9/11 truth debunkers get excited to call it proof that buildings can collapse straight down like this, there's some facts here you should know. The building that collapsed had been abandoned for 5 years. No maintenance work had been kept up all that time, and squatters took over. A raging fire grew and burned down 70% of its lower floors, for 3 hours, until it finally collapsed. The key differences to note are that this was an abandoned building burned with flames throughout the whole structure, for 3 hours, with 5 years' worth of neglect and abuse. The World Trade Center South Tower burned less than 15% of its floors, for only 1 hour, and they were maintained and kept up regularly. Here are some alternative examples of other buildings around the world that were engulfed in a raging fire for 24 hours, and did not collapse. These buildings were kept up with maintenance and burned for much longer than the buildings on September 11th. You'll notice a consistent pattern here. If 7 hours of minor office fires can get hot enough to melt the steel in World Trade Center Building 7, then how is it so commonly seen that similarly built buildings can burn like a torch like this, for much longer durations of time, yet still stand tall? In 2005, the Windsor Tower in Madrid, Spain, burst into an uncontrollable blaze that took 18 to 20 hours to put out. All through the fire, the Windsor Tower never falls. While the 26-story building in Brazil did in fact collapse from fire, its steel columns were thinner and not as thick as the columns in these much larger high-rise buildings, or the skyscrapers of the World Trade Center. The neglect to keep up with maintenance, and the mass of the steel makes all the difference. The Windsor Tower burned for a whole night and day, yet, here is its metal skeleton, still standing without any warping or melting of its internal shape and structure. It isn't common at all that buildings collapse from fire alone. The conclusion here is obvious. Only thin and weak buildings collapse from fire. Now let's review the World Trade Center events. Take notice how they all go down exactly the same. As random as nature is it even mathematically possible for 3 separate physical encounters to all share the same reaction? Now check out this suspicious quote from the World Trade Center's leaseholder.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Twice we hear him say pull it, an architectural term for demolish it. BBC correspondent Jane Standley accidentally reported the collapse of Building 7 on live television 23 minutes before it actually happened, proving that a pre-written script is sent out to report these live events. I'm not seeing any plane wreck debris at the Pennsylvania crash site either, do you? Now let us test NIST's pancake theory with an experiment. A partial demolition is when only the base of the lobby is demolished, leaving the full weight of the entire building crashing into the first 3 floors. Notice that none of the buildings pancake into each other like an accordion, like as NIST explained what happened to the 3 World Trade buildings. Once you understand how difficult it is to get a well-maintained building to naturally collapse into its own footprint, you'll see how rare it is for it to happen 3 times in a row, as it did that fall of 2001. Here you can see dozens of buildings being partially demolished at once. Even after witnessing 95% of the weight of these massive buildings crashing straight into the ground, not a single one of them pancaked into their own footprint.
Something of this kind is what we should have seen when the top section of the towers collapsed onto the lower one. The upper and lower sections should have mutually destroyed each other until all the energy is dissipated and the system comes to a rest. Alternatively, as shown in this experiment with two towers made of snow, the top section could have fallen off to the side after the initial collapse. What could not have happened is this.
A little tiny chunk of the building can't possibly fall and crush the entire structure below it.
This is such a simple, fundamental concept that architects and engineers were astonished in seeing it totally ignored by NIST.
This is high school physics, and our whole society is being led to believe that these fundamental laws of physics, hard science, don't apply anymore.
Last but not least, no debris once again at the Pentagon crash site large enough to have come from a Boeing 757. And the FBI confiscated all other security camera angles of the crash. This is getting ridiculous. This massive lie has been taught and printed into history textbooks for 23 years now, yet it is so quick to prove false with simple side-by-side comparisons like this. Why do we insult our own intelligence by letting the media constantly lie like this about something so big? Either we're too dumb to realize this major discrepancy, or too cowardly to challenge the lying authorities. Either way, Generation Z will be the last heroes left to correct this wrong before the evil bastards who really did this seal the door shut forever. We are anonymous. We are legion. Expect us.